A subset of the Conservative caucus, and I believe it was over 30 members, didn't want to get vaccinated, and they weren't allowed to go into the House of Commons and do their job as elected officials as a result of that. So they decided to speak out about it. And one of them came forward, I think she might have been an Ontario member, and decided to speak about it. So a standard process or the standard approach when I was working as a journalist there was, why don't you want to be vaccinated? Why is there such a group of you? Why have you decided to come forward and speak about this? Instead, the first thing out of the mouth of the CBC announcer, who's a well-known, one of their top people, was, aren't you just giving fuel to the anti-vaxxers?
No questions anymore.
Define an anti-vaxxer for me. I haven't had that defined. And I don't know that people who don't want to take a COVID vaccine because it has yet to be approved for safety, has been widely shown to be ineffective, are against all vaccines. I had a friend of mine who said, I just got back from South America and I took the yellow fever vaccine. I gave it to my kids. I don't want to die, but I don't trust this vaccine yet. So there are laws against anti-hate in this country. So I cannot say things about disparaging things or promote disparaging attitudes for identifiable groups. These would normally include Jews, people of color, people of different sexual identity than mine. However, they've created a whole new one. People who don't want the COVID vaccine. And they have, in my view, transgressed the anti-hate laws when they use the phrase anti-vaxxer, because they have no evidence. And you and I both know that the courts have yet to hear the justification for the imposition of vaccine mandates. It's in process, but they had no rationale on the date. Believe me, the CBC journalists did not do that investigation and determine that all the scientists of the Canadian COVID Care Alliance are wrong, and they, with their journalism degree from 1987 at Carleton, are right about this. So the evidence to me, as somebody who used to work among them, is clear that they're no longer a public broadcaster. The CBC is set up so ideally as a public broadcaster. They have the national, the provincial, and the local. If you are speaking out against any of the government protocols for COVID, you are an anti-vaxxer. And that's the end of the conversation. That's the end of the interview. That woman must have asked that politician 12, 15 times, aren't you just fueling the anti-vaxxer? If I was being interviewed, I would just say, do I have another question? Are you not paying attention to me? Can we have another broadcaster? Somebody who listens? It was ridiculous. It was comedic. It was, if it wasn't so sad and hateful, it would be funny. To me, the inquiry is damn near over when the majority of police leaders get up there and say, we didn't need the Emergencies Act, because that seems to be the singular question. Built into the legislation is there must then be an inquiry to look into what led up to the invocation of this Emergency Measures Act.
Members of law enforcement, Pat Morris and Jim Watson, and even Peter Slowly to a certain extent, all said in their own ways that it was the media that drove this narrative spin machine to give the impression that there was genuine threat. But they were all very clear that was an impression created by the media, not a reflection of reality. And
they said, well, there was a Twitter, a tweet, I'm still amazed at that term, that said there was a fire set by the truckers. Why didn't you reply to that? And the chief of police says, ma'am, we don't respond to Twitter. And it just brings it right down to reality. Are you kidding me? There was a fire set and nobody reported it to the police. So that fire didn't exist. And Jim Watson, the mayor of Ottawa, is on record in evidence, a recording of him, I believe it is, saying they are setting fire to our buildings. So he's following that lie. And it's unfortunate if you're in Ottawa, really, if there's a big protest, and there have been many over the years, this was the biggest one by far. It's a tough place to live. Living near Pearson Airport, that's loud. There are certain realities of living there. And it doesn't excuse what they had to suffer through. For sure, they had to suffer through it. But what the people on the street were saying is we've lost our country. This was a big statement that was going on out there.